Yeah, see that? Windows pulling shenanigans on my microphone again. You guys will have to let me know how it sounds. Not sure what it is. There's something built into Windows that keeps setting my microphone to like 20%. Not sure why. But if I don't remember to check it before getting on. Looks like it's doing okay over here in OBS. It looks like it's hitting all the right colors. It's not going into red. So we have a couple of fun topics we're going to be talking about tonight. Really one topic. And that's pentagram magic and prayer. And I just wanted to sort of I suppose add a few perspectives to the conversation. Of course, we'll go through the astro weather forecast. You'll have to pardon my voice today. I'm going over getting over a chest thing, and it's lingering. And there'll be all kinds of shenanigans. But that said, pentagram magic and prayer, and some questions that I had years ago, and conclusions that I've come to with respect to pentagram magic in general, like why the order that we see, when did that start, what's it based on, what's it derived from, and all these things. I guess one of the most popular rituals related to pentagram magic is the famous Golden Dawn lesser banishing ritual of the pentagram, which has been kind of utilized throughout various systems, just for its simplicity, its adherence to a very specific type of understanding of the elemental nature of things, and how that can overlay on and therefore speak to and from other bodies of knowledge, right? And as far as prayer is concerned, one of the things that I wanted to point out is sort of the correlation between the elemental system, the four elements that we use in the tarot, and how that ties to the name, the fourfold name, right? And that fifth letter, right? The shin of the Yeshua, so to speak, the light of the fifth element of the system of pentagram magic, the lantern of the tools of the magus. The thing that's responsible for illuminating. But more than that, there's a much deeper symbolism in the lantern. It's not just responsible for illuminating, it's the thing that protects the flame. And so the thing that's doing the illuminating is not necessarily inherently part of the fivefold system of the elements. the lantern that represents that fifth element, we apply to spirit, or whatever sort of mnemonic device that you use internally to point to this thing. We can't ignore the symbolism there, that the lantern is the tool, just like the sword and the wand and the cup and so forth. They're pointing at something else, and they all, in a sense, act upon that light. And in the case of the lantern, the purpose of the lantern is to protect it from the wind of the mind. The sword, to protect it from the waters of the heart in the cup, to protect it from being overtaken by the light of the wand. And of course, to apply to the pentacle so that it becomes red hot. And so the lantern has all task. It's the keeper of the flame. And so what are we doing when we're doing pentagram magic? Like, what are we actually doing? Are we calling angels? Are we recognizing the cardinal directions as sort of the extremes in which the universe forms, and so we kind of build our temple? Or are we cleansing the egregore through a banishing ritual like the LBRP? Are we invoking the elemental forces in such a degree that we are in some fashion this sixth thing, applying these five in order to make something new, right? Like a thaumaturgic act. Obviously that depends upon, your intent in the magic, and it depends upon your perspective on what it means. But one thing that I noticed throughout my study and practice and observation of other people who study and practice is that we all seem to honor a very particular system, right? And what that is, just to be clear, is sort of the directionality of the pentagram. This is just a little device I made a while back as like a teaching kind of thing. And we use this directionality in our pentagrams, right? When we draw a pentagram on a space or on a device, and we start from one corner or another, right? Whatever that happens to be. We always recognize that this point of the pentagram is on fire, right? This point is on water, that's on air, that's on earth, that's on spirit. Or again, if we apply the tools, it's, we have the cup, the wand, the pentacle, the sword, and then the lantern, and so forth. But we use this order. Even as far back as the 1880s with the Golden Dawn, right? The Golden Dawn used that order in their pentagram. And of course, why that order? That's an interesting question. And, I kind of sought that answer and had conversations and sort of bumped into my own kind of perspectives on that over the years. Right? And, came to some conclusions. There's a lot of different symbol systems that you can use to ask that question, right? From very esoteric and obscure to, some that are I suppose in a word, divinely inspired, right? Or something that's very rigidly formed from another system and so forth. And there's one system that kind of stood out to me with respect to trying to answer this question because of its level of complexity, but at the same time, it's, how it emerged and when. And the fact that it seems to hold this same kind of order, right? And what I mean by that is the Great Tablet. It contains that ordinality, right? We have the fire point of the pentagram, to the bottom right. We have the earth to the bottom left. We have the cup or the water to the top right. We have the air or the sword to the top left. And even within each tablet, we have the crosses, and those crosses, this is the water cross, this is the fire cross, this is the earth cross, the air cross, right? Those who study Enochian understand this. I'll pop up an English version. Right, and so you'll see the letters that we're familiar with. And where they point is to this greater tablet, right? And now this greater tablet, again, honors that order. And so that order seems to be relevant enough that it's stuck with multiple different systems, have all kind of recognized this directionality with respect to the pentagram, to the fivefold elemental system. And so when we're using something like tarot as an example, which is a very tetragrammaton based system, right? It's the fourfold name as the elements. It's the Kabbalistic story told through a pictorial representation of symbols that are the unfolding of the name being spoken, right? And you can take that to many different degrees, whether you're talking about the name unfolding in the four elements, and then the higher version of that as the sort of the upper world represented as the signs and planets, right? And how that all kind of unfolds. But there's always that fifth sort of element, right? We have the small cards, but there's always the majors that come into that equation, and those majors are another reflection of that. Another way that also reflects in the tarot is in the aces and the court cards. The court cards are sort of a more anthropic lower version, and the aces and the princess is kind of a higher level version of that idea of the elements themselves. And so there's always the four elements in this fifth thing that kind of ties it together. Even in the name Jesus, which is sort of a manifest version of God in certain doctrines, the name Yahovah is this higher sort of spiritual version, and by installing the shin in the name, it becomes a physical form of that in Yeshua, right? The fivefold name, the Pentagrammaton. And so the question is, what's being spoken in this process? Because, of course, each one of these elements, whether it is fire, or wand, or yud, or some variation of one of the three signs, right? We can talk about Tzadi, we could talk about Tet, we can talk about Samek, right? There's many ways that you can point at fire. They're all just words pointing to something else. We could even say flame. And of course, this is just one example of a fire, and that's just a word that points to this thing we're looking at right here. And light is one quality of it, but light's just a word. That's just, the heat. It's restricted due to the fact that it's held on a wick and so forth. It wants to spread. It just can't in this state. It's fixed. Fire. But that said, the thing that we use these words to represent, don't get lost on the words. And so when you're banishing or invoking a specific element for the purposes of some magical work, and you decide that you want to invoke, this is my method nonetheless, it's take from it what you will. When you're invoking fire, I always have viewed that as essentially from spirit, and the first stroke is into fire from spirit, boom. And then when you complete the pentagram will, well, let's just go through the process. You'll see how it starts and lands. Starting from here, not up, but down, is your first stroke. And then you're going to complete the pentagram. And so we end in spirit. Now the other option would be to start on fire and go up, and we're going to end on fire. Okay, which is a sort of a the way I equate this is the difference between bestowal and reception, right? If you are calling fire, it's being bestowed from above, and you're in the act of receiving that fire. When you're speaking it, you're giving it back, and that would be the first stroke. Same thing with all the other elements. If you're calling or receiving water, calling or receiving, like so forth. The question is are you on the perspective of the speaker or the listener? Right? If you are essentially in the act of doing a banishing, then you're not looking to receive. You're looking to bestow it, right? That's a banishing. This is an invocation. Okay. Now, what does it have to do with prayer? Well, there's a very important prayer that you'll see a lot of people do, where they do the Father, Son, and Holy Ghost on their bodies, right? Another way of putting it is the kingdom and the power and the glory forever. There's many ways to do this fourfold pentagram magic of a Christian prayer of the drawing of the cross, right? And so, just to use as a diagram, I'm going to use the Tree of Life. And you'll notice here there's a human form, right? There's just a human shape here to kind of get a vibe of, there's information in the placement of where it is, right? There's information there. But that said, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. Another interesting correlation here is, and I think it's more appropriate, is the Father, the Son, and this as the Holy Ghost. The Holy Ghost is, of course, that feminine energy of the Trinity, right? The she, if there is a she in the Trinity, it's the Holy Ghost, the Holy Spirit. And that's Dalit here in Venus. Down here, it's that other feminine energy, which is the strength or lust card, right? Leo, right? So we have Leo and Venus as those two vibes here between. And so whether you're doing your prayer as Father, Son, Holy Ghost, or Father, Son, Holy Ghost, there's this feminine vibe in between that is the thing that's being referred to there. But the important thing to realize, and the purpose of this, is the order of that. One thing that I've noticed is the Eastern and Western Orthodox Catholic changed that order. There's a Eastern Orthodox says, no, you're supposed to go from the right shoulder to the left shoulder. And then the Western Orthodox go, no, you're supposed to go from the left shoulder to the right shoulder. And you can have the argument, and that's fine, and you can come to your own opinion on that. And of course, that's important that you do that, and that you honor how you feel when making the prayer. That's more important than anything, period, other than some silly doctrine. But I do want to point out an important point here. Depending upon which shoulder you choose, kind of has the vibe of reception or bestowal. It's sort of like, are you coming to or from on a pentagram? We go from Father to Son, that's fine, but now a decision has to be made. Do we go from here to here, or do we go from here to here? And what does it matter? Well, as an example, let's just say, and this is a very helpful framework for thinking about these things. Binah is a receptive energy, right? Chokmah is a bestowal kind of energy, in the sense that he casts light, she receives it, right? So there's this sort of passive and active kind of vibe here. And so when we go Father, Son, and Holy Ghost, if we're coming from here to there, that's very different than coming from here to there. This is casting into, this is giving back. This is saying the thing, and this is like an empty bell that rings it back. And so one's a reception, one's a bestowal. One is an invocation, and one is a banishing. And so when you're doing your prayer and you choose one shoulder or the other, inadvertently you are in the act of a piece of pentagram magic. You are invoking these 4 elements in a specific order, and the order you choose determines the nature of the thing you're doing. Are you expecting to be heard, or are you expecting to hear something? Are you expecting to cast or receive? It's an important question. And keep in mind always that the order is not some arbitrary thing. And the order that you use is one method of invoking one of these particular identities. The watery part of water, the fiery part of earth, the airy part of air, based on the directionality that you use in that process. And so, there's a vocabulary that begins to develop inside of you that understands what's happening here. What does it mean to receive water as opposed to give? Yes, to give it. Like, what's the difference between a cup being filled and a cup being spilled? What does it mean to lay down the sword compared to, use it for defense compared to to swing it at somebody? And so forth. And obviously you could see the same kind of language in the elements of what it means to receive or bestow that element, to be in an act of reception or bestowal of it. And especially when you have gone through the work of becoming the identity of that thing. And so when you are bestowing, you're speaking your name authentically as the Archangel of Fire, which is not Michael. That's a word used in a certain magical system. You will know the name, and it's specific to you when you take on its identity, and so forth. And so this counterclockwise nature of order of the name being spoken, the Yud He Vav He, the creation being spoken, the counterclockwise nature of that should inform us when we apply that to other systems. So for instance, when we're looking at this, what else goes counterclockwise? Well, the ordinality of numbers, right? The order that we see the numbers marching is in a counterclockwise order. Descending on the tree, the planets. Let me pop the tree up. Right, the planets descend starting at Saturn, Jupiter, Mars, the Sun, Venus, Mercury, Moon, right? And that's the order of descent, and that's the same order on the wheel. Right? Mars, Sun, Venus, Mercury, Moon, right? That's also going in a counterclockwise direction, okay? And so there's information there to ask the question of, well, what's going clockwise? Well, let's just look. How about the name being spoken? The elemental layout of the signs is going clockwise. Fire, water, air, earth. Yud, He, Vav, He, right? It's going clockwise, not counterclockwise like the descent. So essentially the order of the elements is ascending. The name being spoken backwards through the signs is calling it back up. In the order that we see it in our wheel spinning, it is in the act of descending, which kind of makes sense. Look at this beautiful bounty of the color of this universe. This that we find ourselves in Malkut. If we came for the colors, we won't be disappointed. And so, to explore the holographic nature, for instance, of the Enochian system is very beautiful. Now, don't get lost in the meaning. It's 4 letters. That's it. And it's just those 4 letters kind of trying on in every combination, seeing how they feel. It's really just a matter of a perspective. It's a matter of it's an angle on the cube, on the right. It's a perspective. That's all it is. You're on this corner looking in as opposed to that corner looking in, or there's that face looking in and so forth. Like we have 12 edges. We have 3 directions, 6 faces, 8 points. There's all kinds of goodies in here. You'll notice that even in hexagram magic that is still honored, right? We have fire, water, air, and earth in that order, with spirit at the top. And then some other very interesting kind of symbolism that is planetary in nature. Once you get into hexagram magic, you're getting into planets, and it's a whole nother level of shenanigans. Right? The Kabbalistic cube has 6 faces and the point in the middle. Right? And who you're being in the middle determines which face is what planet. And so if you're Saturn in the middle, then it unfolds what you're looking at. Right? The Queen's scale of color, this rose, that's all based on the perspective of Saturn being in the center of that cube. But nonetheless, what is that cube? It all derives from just that initial 3 lines of what, forward, back, up, down, left, right, that emerged from a point. And that's just sort of basic geometry. It's what we witness when we look out into our universe and decide to interrogate it with tools. It's what we find. There's a limit to the number of right angles, and that's 3. And we could even take that and stretch that all kinds of different ways to make beautiful forms. And the number of forms that we can create are infinite from our perspective. You can just always add a decimal place and adjust the angle that much more slightly. It's not the same shape. And so through the limitations of our, or the necessity of our perspective, we choose to only view slices of that possibility instead of looking at infinity all at once, which is a different perspective. We, due to where we find ourselves, the condition of being a human being, are in the middle of that. And so we see it broken up and sliced up, or it's shattered into 600 pieces, 6,000 pieces, like, pick your number, pick your system to satisfy the numerology. Gosh, there's something satisfying about 4, isn't there? It's hard not to see it. But that's just sort of an actual, it's a mathematical eventuality, right? If anything is a thing and thingness becomes a thing, there's 1. And as soon as there's 1, and there's where 1 lives, right? 1, that the infinite thing that became aware for let's not get into the why of that. There, I have opinions, but nonetheless, let's not get into the why. It became aware. And so it was it, and then it looked out and kind of mistook what it was looking out as something else and saw it and not it. 2 was born. And anytime you have a 1, it has to, that 1 occupies space, right? Like, we're 3-dimensional beings, and so it's tough for our brain to grok oneness without oneness being in some space, which implies 2-ness. And therefore, there's a third thing, which is the distance in between. So anytime you have a 1, right away you have a 3. Like, 1 turns in, you can't have 1 without 3. 1, the space it occupies, the distance between, the extreme of where it is and the end of that space. Sort of the in-betweenness of that. And of course, those 3 things together create an object. Create something that has time, space, and a perspective. And now a 4th thing has happened. Thingness became observed. Like, it has a perspective that's unique from another perspective, and so difference occurs, and there's myriad can take place of interpretation. I mean, obviously these are all just philosophical terms trying to point to an experience of coming in contact with that. And so the knowing becomes empirical. That's a good one. And that'll illustrate that pretty well. It's the Four of Wands. But the purpose of the conversation here is to recognize when we're doing pentagram magic and we honor those positions for the elements, that's not accidental, right? And rather than deciding, oh, it's cool because it emerged in Enochian and that's a cool spooky word that has cool spooky symbols and all kinds of ooh. No. We're looking at the core basic reality as a function of defining states. The fire, water, air, and earth is the solid, liquid, gas, plasma is the gravity, magnetism, and strong and weak nuclear. There's these all, if they're this kind of fourness occurs once you observe any reality, any system, and break it down to what's necessary in order to describe it. You'll find that there's three qualities that describe a fourth thing that are kind of present and necessary to take place. That's not obviously always the case in every case, but it is. I mean, what's its shape? What's its weight? What's its position? If you know those three things, you can tell a lot about a thing. Like there's, and obviously if you know that about its surrounding environment over several frames, you can begin to actually make predictions, right? You can't look at a still frame and know what anything's going to do next, but if you have a couple of frames of data, you can make some assertions. The more frames, the more accurate your data, your prediction's probably going to be, right? And so we got to be careful when we're talking about prediction, because you have to really consider. And when I say, the environment, like, we're not just talking about billiard balls banging together. I mean, it's hard to really even understand what influences what. What's responsible for the things that we witness. When we're doing an LBRP, it's a prayer. When we're doing the signs of the cross, we're doing an LBRP. And the deeper you understand that, the closer you can get to not the purpose of the work, because that's certainly that's a whole different conversation. Purpose. You can have a much deeper understanding during the process, a much more full, robust, empirical contact to the forces that we're talking about, to the intelligences that we're speaking to. When we ask the question of who's on the other side of the cards, right? Well, when I'm invoking fire, who am I invoking? These names are not the thing I'm actually speaking to, right? They just point to it. the angel of fire in my personal work has a very specifically derived system that I use. Instead of using the Enochian system or using the system of, say, Kabbalah or anything else that I show on the show here or any of this other stuff, I made a very specific decision for magical reasons during a working, and I chose, personally, Bereshit. But basically, I take the first 72 characters of Genesis from the original Hebrew and lay that out forward and backward, and utilize that to derive the angel names for my angels of fire. This top line here in English characters. Now, ignore the bottom one. That's a specific piece of Tamura that would only be relevant to me under certain workings. You could use it if you'd like, but it's without understanding why I derived that, it'd be kind of silly. But this top one is just strictly the normal ShemHaMephorash starting at Leo. But you'll notice I'm using the letters of, these are transliterated, but the Hebrew Genesis, first 72. Okay, and now that said, my angels for fire are very different, right? Like, these are going to be different names, and there's a system that I use internally. It's irrelevant to share it here, but for my suffixes, they're not always El and Ea. It depends upon, the reception and bestowal, like I talked about, if they're speaking or listening, what side of that are we on. So the shoulder is determined by when I'm looking at the thing, as opposed to what I'm witnessing. But nonetheless, and again, that's just sort of developed over time in my own personal ritual. But that said, the name of the entity is not some winged angel. It's what the words that each faith is using in their own special way to point to something else. And fire is a thing that can be known and you can come in contact with. And it's not just a flame. Of course, a flame is a representation of fire, but certainly so is the light that's illuminating this space. And its liquid state is a totally different state, and its vow, its sword, is what's allowing this all to kind of be heard. The electricity is liquid, like it conveys. It's the thing that's moving. And of course, the thing that causes the spark to begin with is the wand, the fire. Electricity is fire. The actual thing that zaps you is the fire. The thing that's conveying the thing that zaps you is the water. The light that you see and all this other stuff is the thing you're seeing, is the sword. And the thing that's allowed to happen because of those coming together, the screen, the internet connection, is the pentacle. And by looking at this, you can see, the process of you hearing my voice and seeing the screen and putting those together. The thing spoken, the thing you're hearing, not me, not those elements, not you on the side listening. The thing spoken in between is the pentacle. And when I speak a certain truth that to you rings, and we both believe and understand that the thing that we are hearing is what we are, that we're all just taking a perspective. The reason I think that I'm the speaker is because I believe that I'm taking the perspective of the speaker, but I could easily take the perspective of the listener and realize that, no, wait a minute. And of course, all I am is the idea that was born. My body, the elements, the identity I chose, the words I chose, are all just tools in order for that will to be achieved, which is to take a concept that lives in me and install it in you across time and space, for that thing to well up in your heart or in your mind. And it be conveyed through the process of those elements interacting for that purpose. And that takes place occasionally. If there's a level of openness to the process of communication, and you're have a sufficient understanding of the vocabulary used, or at least the intent behind that. That's obviously the most important. Then that can take place, and when it does, it's really quite something, isn't it? Because in that moment, you're taking on the form of that idea, right? By becoming the thing spoken, the thing thought, the thing seen, your form changes. And so does the form of the speaker or the listener, right? You become the same thing. You occupy the same space. Your proximity is different in the higher world than we think down here, right? We can actually be one space, be one thing during that period of time when you are in the state of being the thing spoken, being the thing seen. Instead of finding yourself in the dark and seeing a light in the distance and thinking it's somebody, realize that the light you saw was you calling your name. And all you're seeing is the echo back. It's just an echo bouncing off of the walls of your heart. It's all you. And if I'm in the same place at the same time, I'm speaking the words and you're hearing them, we occupy the same space. We are together. You're never alone. If somebody has passed recently, you can be with them. Somebody in the past, especially your past self, I encourage you to go through the exercise I just talked about with your past self, and you can be together, and you can be the love that you needed and deserved. And just because of the circumstance, which was random and out of your control, you didn't receive, you can give that to yourself, because why not? My future self right now is going to say I love you to my past self right now. Hey, bud, I love you. You did all right. It's okay. I love you. And I'm doing that right now, knowing that my future self's going to do that for me in a year. Like, I'm never alone. I pop in on my mom every once in a while. I lost her a while back. It's been a while now, but I love her. And I miss her all, and then she comes into my space all the time, and I think about her a lot, and then I'm every once in a while, it's great. I remember I can be with her for a sec, like, oh, you know what? Let me just not forget, and remember that when she passed, she was never without me. When she got there, I was already there waiting for her also, and so she was never without me. Or anybody else in her life that she wanted to be with. You know, we're the ones that, because we mistake what's going on, you know, feel loss and miss people. And of course, you know, I can't call her right now and hear her voice and sound, but we can share space. And I can feel her and know that she's there. And it's an empirical knowing. It's not a mental activity. Kind of easy when you're talking about mothers or people that you maybe have some connection. And I gotta be honest, my mother, our relationship was not good when she was alive. She was not what I would call a saint. Although at the same time, I really, now that I look and am able to see things as an adult and through the magical perspective and otherwise, she was blameless. It's that level of not forgiveness. Forgiveness isn't even necessitated when you realize the truth. It's the understanding of who she was, and that allows me to let go of that and to see her for the beautiful creation that she was, and was just flawed by the environment. And, forgiveness assumes there's something to forgive. That's a fallacy. So, prayer, that's what we're doing when we do these rituals, whether you're in the state of speaking the prayer or hearing it. right? A banishing or an invocation is strictly a question of, am I the speaker or the listener? That's it. And when you're praying, you're doing the same thing. And ask yourself, who am I being in this circumstance, right? Am I speaking or listening? Am I bestowing or receiving? Is my goal to bestow or is my goal to receive? And of course the beauty is if you're able to balance the elements and find yourself in the middle where you're doing neither, because there's no need to speak or listen when you have become understanding. And due to that understanding, you come in contact with the thing that you're attempting to understand, and you then become the knowing. And by becoming the knowing, the necessity to speak doesn't exist. There is no identity to mistake as somebody else. There's no identity necessitated to create a vocabulary that changes what the thing we're experiencing is by identifying with the word instead of the thing. When I say love, I'm not trying to point to a word. I'm trying to take a feeling inside of me and make you feel that thing. That thing you're feeling is what the word love. And so that's what we're talking about here. When you're in a state of knowing, i.e., are in contact with creation, it is a empirical knowing. When you're in the state of knowing, the necessity for identity doesn't exist. There is no question to be asked. That's what knowing means. That's what knowledge is. You'll hear knowledge kicked around a lot in occult circles, right? It's the basis for Thelema. Knowledge and conversation of the Holy Guardian Angel is one of the goals of the work, if not the goal. Right? Knowledge is a very interesting term. Conversation. Oh, love that word. Who's speaking, who's listening, what's being spoken. When you realize you're all three, knowledge. Knowledge and conversation at the same time. Knowledge and conversation at the same time. Let's talk through that. Well, we know knowledge is implying that there's an empirical contact with creation. That's knowledge. Knowing the thing, because now I know what this card feels like. A minute ago, I kind of could infer what it felt like, but no, now I know. That's knowledge. Okay? Conversation. There's a speaker and a listener. Something is being felt. That's the act of listening. Something is behaving in such a fashion, whether it has any intent or not is irrelevant, that it has qualities that can be measured by my touch. The listener is the thing doing the touching. The thing I feel is the one speaking. And of course the thing felt, like the temperature, the quality, the hardness, the smoothness, whatever the caseness, is the vocabulary chosen to identify, i.e. interpret what's being spoken. Of course, it's none of those things. I chose to feel it, the coldness, the hardness, the softness, the color of it. I chose what quality to measure. What quality I see is based on what I'm choosing to measure. But if I come in contact with the thing it's pointing to and no longer necessitate those words, I can finally experience it for what it is. And we become the same thing. We occupy the same space, and that is the knowing. And there's a conversation occurring at the same time, because there's a speaker, listener, and a thing spoken occurring in that knowing. The knowing is a product of those three things in unison. Knowledge and conversation together. Knowledge and conversation. Right, and now, Holy Guardian Angel, that's another one where, it's obviously that wasn't invented by Crowley or Thelema, or, even Abramelin, or even when further, it doesn't matter, like, where the term came from. I think it's sort of not really a very good or useful phrase anymore, unless you really go into and understand what holy means, and guardian, and these other things, or can, have a sort of some Kabbalistic understanding of why Thelemites point to Tiferet as the HGA. Like, why isn't it up here? Or I don't understand, why is it, right? And so you can ask the question about that and get a lot of opinions. But the best way to get the answer to that is to do the experience, do the work, go through the experience, And it'll be clear to you on that tree when you look at it after the fact where the Holy Guardian Angel is. And how silly the whole conversation is. And how you can't blame yourself for having certain perspectives on it. Like, they're totally sound at the time. And they're useful for their purpose in the moment. But just don't forget that the moment is always a conversation. It's never ending. God did not speak existence into reality. He's speaking it into reality. And, well, not he. Reality is in the process of being spoken. The word is unfolding. And when we invoke or we banish and we honor this direction, what we're honoring is the Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, the name being spoken. And when we do it backwards or forwards determines if we're sending it back or getting it down, if we're in the act of speaking or listening. Reception, bestowal. What side of that are we on? Of course it's both. It's our capacity to allow ourselves to be filled up and then spill it back out, and be filled up and spill it back out. And it's cups going back and forth. Where have I seen that? I mean, obviously the most famous example of that image in the would be temperance, right? And temperance is the card of the season, right? Temperance is the card for Sagittarius and the Golden Dawn-based tarot system, right? Which is, comes from the astrological, from Levy and that group, and, who knows where it started. Let's be honest. We don't. It's just probably a little older than we think and probably a little newer than we think. Okay, where is my Sagittarius? All right, the cups back and forth. Am I speaking? Am I listening? Conversation. Anyway, so it's all a prayer. It's all a prayer from one perspective or another. You want to hear my favorite prayer? It's an E5, by the way. It's E5 on the piano. I don't know if you can hear that with the music. Let me turn the music off so you can... E5. I love that. I incorporate it into a lot of music that I write. And not for any kind of weird magical reason. I enjoy the sound of it. It's very versatile, E. If there's any musicians out there, they can attest to the fact that E is versatile. So yeah, I hope I kind of spoke that tonight, and certainly I am available through Discord and other channels, if you're catching this after the stream, to kind of clarify and discuss and to kind of, we can pick each other's brains on our own interpretations of all this, so we can all come to a deeper understanding, right? I put this out there not to teach this as the doctrine, but to invite you to interrogate my statements and provide a feedback to yourself, how we can, thank you, kitten, how we can learn from each other and to get closer to knowing this thing empirically amongst ourselves in a group setting. Imagine going through the process of HGA and sharing it, and of course that occurs a lot. I'm not, but with a almost a societal understanding. And here's the thing, and this was taught in Abramelin. Why people miss this, it just boggles my mind. It doesn't matter what religion you have. It doesn't matter what faith you follow. It doesn't matter. Stick with your mother religion. Recognize is spoken in your religion. That within the language of the doctrine you already follow is the same truth. And so we could all have that same experience, that same unified space, regardless of our religion and faith, in full recognition that we're all seeking the same thing and speaking the same thing. The thing that we decide to give a name to, like Yahovah or Elohim or Adonai or God or any Allah, and it doesn't matter what words you pick. I'm pretty sure that the self that's us at the end of time, that knows how this all ends, doesn't care as long as we recognize it. Just, it doesn't want to be alone. That's all. That's all this is. We woke up in the dark and we were scared and we cried out. And that sound reached the end of the universe and it looped back and we saw it as a light, thinking it was somebody else. And so we spoke our name to it. And the act of us speaking our name to this thing was that first light. Beautiful. It's a beautiful story. Know it and tell it in your own experience. Use as many letters as you want. You want to use 22 of them? That's cool. You want to use 26 of them? Go right ahead. You want to limit it to 4? Even better. I mean, you can break it down to 2 letters, right? Om, that's another very beautiful idea of that simplicity. Or you can, even go down to Tao, right? Which is, this sort of ebb and flow of just really, it's just a unified duality. One thing but nonetheless, the whole purpose of all this is to develop your own tarot, develop your own LBRP, develop your own ShemHaMephorash, develop your own pentacle. Don't assign an angel a name. Instead, become that angel and speak your name. Don't ask the universe for what you want. Impregnate the universe with your will, and then take the identity of the universe and give birth to it. That's a totally different experience than asking for something. That's right. Knock the universe up with your will, become the universe, and then give birth. It's what you're doing already anyway. So you might as well participate in the process. Otherwise, the universe is just going to kick your ass, right? Isn't that kind of what's going on right now? When we put our heads down and don't pay attention to what we're doing, we'll get eaten. And that's just nature. It's not, Is the lion evil for eating the gazelle? I mean, I'm not getting into the realm of maliciousness. That's a different thing. There is the capacity through, unfortunately, self-awareness gave human beings the ability to enjoy torture. What the fuck is that? I'm talking about nature. It's not until you get into the higher animals, like apes, where you get into the capacity to harm for pleasure. It's really something. It's weird how that can, but it is a thing that emerges in even apes. I mean, a lion will eat the young of the other lion, but it's not enjoying it. Apes do something very similar, but don't look it up. But it's a strange thing how, there's a certain point, and now what can we do? This is what the Masons teach us. We recognize that limitation, and we learn to subdue our passions, right? That doesn't just include physical passions and, overeating or these other things. It includes, how we treat our fellow man by recognizing ours and their limitations. It's a method of forgiving those that hurt us. That doesn't mean you let them keep doing it. right? And that you don't protect, of course you protect yourself and the people you love and so forth, and them from themselves. But nonetheless, it allows us to at least understand the situation and to not take ownership of being the victim or, overreact. And instead we do what needs to be done and in a peaceful and correct manner. And we can rely upon our heart and mind to come to these conclusions more effectively, than kind of what we're seeing in the world right now. And we can't blame ourselves. But it might be time to kind of revisit who we're being. So yeah, I think I said it. And if anybody has any other questions, again, feel free to go around amongst all the other things. I also pop onto Twitch sometimes if you want to catch me live. If not, shoot me a text. My phone number is about to come up on the screen there. Or you can reach me any of the other ways, and we can have continue the chat further. If you have some good insights or anything that you want to share that's of value to the community, well, I'll get you on and we can talk live and turn it into a conversation for the benefit of the community. Always with the intent of me, right? And that we understand that these things are difficult topics to talk about without getting lost in the maze of meaning. Andrea, how's it going? It's good to see you tonight. I've been not feeling so well, so I had to kind of take a break there because I was choking my head off, and I'm having a chest thing I'm getting over. And so I've been sick. I hopped on Twitch once to kind of see how I felt and sort of got through a little thing, but tonight was really good. I think I threw some good insights out there that can help people to understand just the process of pentagram magic. Kind of what's really happening. Made some correlations between invocation and prayer, banishing, and the difference between invocation and banishing, and speaking and listening. Right, and there's some good stuff there. And that same magic could be applied to something, say like bead magic, as an example. Right, where if we take 5 beads here, and we decide to, where's my image? Kind of put them in some order. Let's stick this in the middle here. By placing them in fire, water, air, earth, and spirit is very similar to casting each individual section of the pentagram, right? And now, from a divinatory perspective too, we can overlay over this in our minds that pentagram, knowing that this is the spiritual center, this is the fire, right, the water, air, earth, and know that when we put these beads down, we're speaking the name, which is the same thing when we're using the cards and or speaking the elemental language. It's the same thing as the name being spoken. So, what time zone are you in, by the way, Andrea? I wonder. It's 2:40 Eastern. So. Yeah, kitten's getting over stuff too. a lot of tissues. Feeling over here, somewhere in this section. Okay. Brrr. Baby, it's cold outside. Oof. Yeah. It's chilly up by me too, but nah, it's wintertime. Oof, listen to my voice crack. It's wintertime, I tell you what. Yeah, no kidding. Yeah, this is the season to buy some stock and Kleenex. Funny, all kinds of fun stuff floating around. I was just talking about this with somebody with respect to the idea of the sacrifice in Sagittarius, and then the descent into hell in Capricorn, right? The devil card of Capricorn, which moves into the redemption of as light in the star of Aquarius, and the cup spilling out, and then being the sound that's heard in the vibration of the moon card of Pisces, right? And then that moving into Aries as the thing that Aries is ignited by, right? And so it's sort of a little story to kind of get through that, you know, and sort of how we go through this process, like starting at Sagittarius, you know, Capricorn, we go through Aquarius into Pisces, and then into Aries. Which on this particular diagram for the Thelemites and so forth in the room, I did not do the Sadi swap on the rose. I kind of left the rose as the rose is. You know, on my own stuff, I make that change. And I do honor that change of having Sadi at, which is right here at the top of the screen, you'll see. But nonetheless, so this you'll notice that the kind of the vibe of Aries, you know, we have Mars and Sun as it's coming in as these very sort of bright, fiery vibes before it begins to, you know, descend into and sort of soften up as we get into that Taurus Venus sort of, right? We go from Mars into Venus, and it starts off Mars and Sun in sort of that area right there. So yeah, hopefully it just stays as a runny nose and it's no big deal, but I don't know. There's all kinds of stuff brewing out there this year. So that was a fun conversation. What changes? Nothing. Just the perspective. And as you move through it, and the environment changes, everything looks like it's moving and changing. It's not, just your perspective changes, right? It's just your perspective changing. Which side you see it from. So yeah, that's it's funny that here we are. We're all getting over something, and I guess that means we can't sleep. I mean, it's 2:45 right here, and I'm like, I should be tired. I should be feeling, but no, I'm actually just, I don't know, I can't sleep. Gemini. Gemini is opposite us right now. Right? Zoot Suit Riot? They're not ringing a bell. Right, it's opposite Sagittarius is Gemini. And you'll see, interestingly, in the Thoth Tarot, I think it's depicted very well. It really gets to the heart of the fact that the red lion becomes white, the white lion eagle becomes red, and sort of the swapping of those elements between the two. And what's occurring, that the marriage is complete when the beings become one. Right? And so this card really informs this card in a very important way, and they're opposite on the zodiacal wheel. This being Sagittarius, which is where we are now. And depending upon the wheel that you use, it's kind of, the order's all the same, right? The Kabbalistic rose is really just a matter of or the Rosicrucian rose, or whatever you call it. The rose is the outer petals of the rose are the signs, necessitated due to their existing, right? And then that inner ring being the planets, and then the ring inside of that is the sort of the archetypal states. The Aleph Mem Shin is the salt, sulfur, mercury, right? The fixed, cardinal, mutable kind of machinations of how things transform into other things. I have to ask, the Zoot Suit Riot, is that relevant to the it's one of those things that you kind of put out there and it's like, I gotta know what you meant. Tell me what you mean. Oh, okay, yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay. I'll have to check it out. And so, yeah, I mean, I know it seems like sort of a hot take to equate prayer with pentagram magic, or to say that by doing the signs of the cross you're essentially doing pentagram magic. The correlation is actually much greater than you can understand until you do the exercise, and then it's like so obvious. Or look into LBRP as an example. Why we call the words like Malkut, that we're talking about the kingdom, and in the thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory. These words are Kabbalistic in nature and are referring to the Sephirah. Hello, Martin. Thank you for popping in. And so, when we hear thine is the kingdom and the power and the glory, it's like, what are we speaking about here? Like, why those words? And when you're doing the LBRP, it may not be so necessarily clear that it's very similar to a Christian prayer, but more appropriately, the Christians may not necessarily be welcome, or welcome, I've just read the word welcome, may not be aware of that same correlation, that same idea that you're invoking the shoulders of the tree, right? So to speak. Cornelia, great. Sure, I would love to. Absolutely. If you have any particular question, just go ahead and put it in the chat there, and I'll shuffle in the meantime. And so the idea of prayer and your approach to that will determine whether you are in the state of speaking or listening, whether you're in the state of, like I said, the Western Orthodox goes left to right, whereas the, Eastern goes from right to left, and there's an implication on what side you're invoking in its power or glory. Okay. Mm-hmm. So what is it I can provide insight on? Is it related to your children or employment or something more specific? Oof. Tough stuff. Yeah, that's heavy. Okay. And I'll tell you, I wish that what you just typed weren't such a sort of common experience lately. I mean, not obviously your experience is very unique. And how you kind of developed the environment that you're in through things inside and outside of your control are very, very different than anyone else. But it really just seems like there's a weird kind of energy. But in this particular circumstance, let's just talk about that. Because what I'm going to do is I'm going to just make an assumption on what needs to be heard here. And we're going to kind of go through the process of putting, a vocabulary to it, but nonetheless. What is drug addiction? But essentially a desire to satisfy a need that you feel is not being fulfilled, or to help ignore the thing that you aren't getting and the pain that comes from that, right? And so we either choose to use drugs to fill that need or help us ignore that it won't be fulfilled, right? And so what that means is there's an implication that you believe something's missing, even if it isn't. Like, there is a sensation of something that needs to be escaped or that can't be addressed, and so it requires you to take this approach, right? That's okay. Sure. Wow. I can already guarantee you, without looking at cards or anything else, you two don't understand each other, right? And that's sort of the human condition. That's almost where we have to kind of let compassion take over and recognize no one understands anyone. We're all making it up as we go. And I want to be clear, I don't mean that we're dishonest about that. I mean, we have to recognize who we're being is a thing that we choose in the moment. And a lot of times we'll reinforce certain ideas or what we believe about what people told us, who we are, what we aren't. Form our thoughts around the club that we belong to, right? And it's so strange. And so sometimes we lose sight of that, and we forget that we're all just pretending, and and everyone else is also pretending. And so the person that you are looking at in your husband, and the person your husband is looking at in you, you're both a bunch of liars, right? I mean, like we forget we're pretending to be somebody for someone, and they're doing the same thing, and those two fake characters that are pretending for each other are having a miscommunication. Well, obviously. Now, I'm not saying it's so easy to be authentic. It isn't. We have no choice. You can't speak if not through an identity and through a vocabulary, right? So even the bird requires you to invent a personality to speak through. And that's really what's happening if we think about it. Right? Who are we? I don't know. We kind of make that decision in the moment when someone asks us what our favorite color is. And then we justify a little story that we tell about why that's the case. Don't identify with the story. And that's what we do, and then we forget that we're all a bunch of liars that have no choice because we have to communicate with each other, and so we have to invent an identity, a personality, a vocabulary, a meaning and context, and tell our story. And so a lot of times when there's a lack of communication, whether it's either I don't think I'm being heard, or I don't think they're communicating, or I don't think I'm being understood, whatever the case, it's because that communication is already kind of stopped by the fact that the person you're talking to isn't even the one you want to be talking to. You're trying to get through his heart, his character, right? The not even just the ego. That's a totally different thing that we have to work around. And so, there needs to be a real and actual active moment where you both say, okay, wait a minute. Something in my heart made me fall in love with this man. That thing is not the man I'm talking to now. The man I'm talking to now is who he became because he has to live life, interact with people, interact with the, his trade and the pecking order in his job and how he feels as a man related to the other men in society. All these things that shape the fake person he puts on in front of you. That's not the man you married, of course not. And the man you fell in love with is that little ring in his heart that is behind that. And it's the same for you. And this includes meaning that the sadness that you feel, or the loss that you feel, or the shame, or whatever these ugly feelings that heart are us lying to ourselves and us identifying it most of the time. We make mistakes, it happens, and we can't kill ourselves over that. We have to say, okay, I did this thing, and I can't, I have to hold myself accountable, or they did a thing, and I have to be honest and speak to them. And I'm going to get to the cards in a sec, but I'm just going to say this last thing when it comes to communication with a lover. There's a difference between speaking to the person they're pretending to be, even if they're not angry, but especially if they are and they're just spewing their shit, right? I mean, there's almost no point in trying to talk if there's a disagreement, but talk to the actual person, not the person they're pretending to be. So when they give, my wife does it all the time, where I'm being, whatever the case, typically some kind of cynical nonsense over something I read in the news. And I'll say some ugly thing, and she'll say, that's bullshit, right? You just made that up. And it kind of snaps me out of that moment. It's so great, that we kind of, she's got my back on that sometimes, and man, it's cool. But that said, try to speak to the person, and again, more especially for you, when he speaks, listen, and remember that this is a character talking to you. And the two of you can even take his hands and say, I'm going to do this exercise. A wacko guy on the internet taught, I'm doing this over 40 years. I was a deacon in a church. I've studied Rosicrucian and Freemason and Magick a long time, and I know love. I know the word. And when I say no, I mean I've been in contact with the Creator and heard it spoken. He told me that I'm supposed to come to you and take your hands, and I'm supposed to tell you that the people we're pretending to be are not the ones that we fell in love with, and I'm supposed to look you in the eyes while you do the same thing to me, and we just take a breath and remember that just for a minute before we continue this conversation. And we're going to recognize that we're pretending. And you will feel the love. You watch what happens. Because it even gives you permission to have that kind of conversation with somebody that you can't even stand if you're in the middle of a fight. Or that you can sort of shut down that nonsense and shut down their nonsense if they're in the middle of a whatever. But let's now just take that perspective here and see what it has to say. Because I hear you. Feeling like you're not understood is the worst. It feels like you're not heard, like they don't care, or that they can't understand, like you're wasting your time. No. What's actually happening is very simply you have a men are from Mars, women are from Venus kind of thing right here. November 24th, okay. So you're also a Sagittarius. Right. And now you're dealing with a Pisces. Right? You have a Sagittarius dealing with a Pisces. That's funny. That's my sister and I. I'm a Sag. My sister's Pisces. And now you, obviously, you are a deep feel. You feel shit. Like, people out there, man, don't mistake Sagittarius because we're, good with words and, we're poetic and musical and all these things. No, we feel hard, man. Mutable fire is a weird state to live in. Are you kidding? Ask someone who's a Sag rising. Those people are... They feel deep. Pisces it's interesting. Pisces feels, but they're also kind of... Depending on, an ill-dignified Pisces is a very needy person. And that could be very, emotionally, almost not gaslighting, but they're almost manipulative because they require so much emotional energy to maintain that they can fall into very deep pits if they're not given that. Or even in some cases, they can lash out, which is more rare, but it does occur, right? And so, that doesn't mean that that's a bad combination. That's not what I'm saying. You can parlay your poetry, the heat that you provide as the Sagittarius, into his emotion and lift him. Be the source of his confidence. And watch him step up for that, But that said, it's, that combo can be a little weird because the one's burned up and the other one's burned up, and, they can be very sort of empathic as far as that, right? Jazz, gospel, soul, yeah. It's all sensation, right? It's physical, emotional sensation as music. I feel it. Okay. The Three of Cups is a neat little moment where everyone's kind of pouring into everyone else's cup, and so no one's empty. Abundance is the recognition of the fact that if we all kind of had each other's backs, we'd all be fine. There is plenty to go around. There has to sort of be an equality of that. Now, how this ties to you in this particular circumstance, the astrological language of this card is Mercury in Cancer. And it's basically, if you can imagine, you'll often see three women dancing with a cup, right? Okay, well, so then in the language of Christianity, This is the Trinity as one voice. You know, like, and I want to point out what I mean by that. If you just look at the Father, that's like looking at the Old Testament and God is an asshole. Dude, he's angry and vengeful, and then he smites smitely while he's smiting, right? And if we look at just Jesus and we ignore the Father or the Holy Spirit, then it becomes almost like a weird kind of culty thing, right? Where it's like, wait a minute, what are we actually doing here? Or if we ignore Holy Spirit, then there's no feminine energy in the Trinity. And you wind up having this smitey Father, but the redeeming Son, but what do we do in the meantime till he comes back kind of thing? You know, we still need some kind of, and the Holy Spirit needs to be part of that conversation, frankly. One of my favorite books is Good Morning, Holy Spirit, which is the recognition every morning that you wake up that is present in our lives, and we should take her in. Be filled up by that breath of life, the breath of God, the breath that was the wind that the name he spoke creation into was carried by. The feminine energy is the conveyance, the water. That's what the Holy Spirit is. It is breath of God, but it's the thing that conveyed the word he spoke. And let me be more clear, is speaking. God did not speak the world into existence. He's speaking it into existence. It's occurring right now. We're watching it being spoken, right? What this card refers to is that Trinity is in unison, meaning that you're not just worshiping the Father. You're not just worshiping the Son. You're not just worshiping the Holy Spirit. You're recognizing you are the beautiful, holy creation of those three things together. And now on that note, we can now ask ourselves, clearly there's an imbalance occurring. And so which one's balanced or imbalanced? Like, what's the practical answer to how you move forward in order to maybe find that? This is Saturn, the planet, the universe card of the world. Yeah. Good. I think it's happening for a lot of us. This moment is very special. You'll notice the 4 cherubic signs on the outside, right? With around the outside. This right here is Leo and Taurus. And depending upon the system, we can talk about all the shenanigans here, but basically it's Scorpio and Aquarius that gets swapped, but doesn't, and so the symbol, whatever. But these are the 4 fixed zodiac signs. And there's some other stuff going on here that's very, very symbolic. The hook, the serpents, all this stuff. This is really, it's the symbol of Ophiuchus, the serpent bearer. Which actually you may be an Ophiuchian. When were you born? Let's see, 24th? No, you just missed it. So you're Sagittarius, but there's a small little window in between where Ophiuchus overlaps Sagittarius and Scorpio, or it's in that range. Anyway, not Scorpio, but Sagittarius until, I forget, it's another couple days from now. I forget. You can easily look it up and see, but nonetheless. And I even spoke to it tonight. Okay? With respect to not leaving your mother religion, but understanding the truth of what he taught. For instance, Jesus Christ taught through allegory and metaphor to the masses, but he spoke openly to the disciples. And what he taught the disciples was actual contact with the Creator, like being in the same form, being together. It's not just a conversation through prayer, but it's actual union with God. That's what Christ's teachings were, and that's very indicative of this symbol. Is the idea of that ecstatic moment. There's many priests that have women and men. They weren't priests, the women back in the old ages, that wrote on this subject, that wrote on the ecstatic moment of prayer when you recognize and have union. Not just union with the Father, Not just union with the Son, not just union with the Holy Spirit, but you become the thing that is created from their union. And you become the fourth. If we look at this as a symbol, those 3 points right there are the Trinity, and it's that fourth point that becomes a solid object. No problem, we'll get you on the list, Lisa. Okay? And so those 3 points are the Trinity, and that fourth point that descends down is us. But look, it's not us, it's one thing, okay? And so this is an idea of the doctrine. It was spoken differently, obviously. Christ didn't use Platonic solids, right? He wasn't. That came later. And so there's no reason to deviate from your faith in Christianity as long as you understand what's actually being taught in the doctrine. The name Yahovah, the Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, with the Shin becomes Yeshua. This is the God as man, Jesus, and what that is referring to, the name being the 4 elements, the Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh of the name, the 4 elements of the tarot. These are all speaking the same thing. This experience of ecstasy that you find yourself in the universe card, that the world, the beginning that is the end, it's the last of the major arcana, is that moment of bliss before you get hooked back in and start over again as a physical being on Earth, right? This is that moment of sort of being in that place. Let's see here. It's like that moment when you're praying, when you recognize that God is hearing you, and you can hear God when you feel the presence. Yeah. Yes, and it becomes you're both at the same time recognizing that, right? When you call up the prayer to God and He hears it, you feel Him ringing. That sensation inside of you is you feeling that recognition, right? Good word. Another word for communion is conversation for the Thelemites. And I don't mean communion as far as the act of the bread and the wine, but what it's pointing to. Bread and the wine's a word for what's happening. You're becoming one. When you ingest the bread and the wine, you become one being, right? It's your form and their form become one thing. And now here, the Princess of Cup, this is the princesses are a higher level kind of thing than the other court cards. They, even seasonally, they refer to as entire seasons, right? So you'll notice here the outer ring is the princesses, okay? And the Princess of Cups is the period of time that takes us through the middle of and deposits us at the end of Capricorn. So it ends at the period of time we're in right now. We're in the 9, we're about to enter the 10 in a day or so. So we're moving from that moon into the Saturn. This is the period of time that we're in right now. And the Princess of Cup ends at that stage, right? That's what this card is referring to as far as the season. And what this means is that there is a transition about to take place. And it's moving in from that middle point into that, it's kind of the end. And now what the end refers to is not like something's ending. More appropriately, in Sagittarius we see... Let me pull the card up so that we can reference it at the same time in just a moment, pardon. Alright, here we go. Art. There it is. Alright, here's our Sagittarius. For this transformation, and what this is there is an alchemical kind of thing happening here. It's sort of like boiling out the bad stuff so that just the water rises and the bad stuff is left underneath in the pot, and then that water that rose condenses as pure water. Okay, that's what's happening in this card right here. And now that idea is spoken about through this period of time in that we're entering right now at the end of the year. Okay. And so Sagittarius, let me pull that back up actually, I think it'll fit. Yeah. Sagittarius is referring to this moment, right? So where we are transforming from mutable fire into cardinal earth. Okay? And now that, what does that mean? It means you're sublimating, you're lifting up The stuff that's pure, the junk stays at the bottom, and that junk appears in the devil card of Capricorn as heavy stuff. And then the rest gets raised up as air in Aquarius. It's this beautiful story, and then we wind up in, here's your husband in Pisces. Right? And so that's the Sagittarius and Pisces story. And what's happening here is that the cup being spilled out rings when it's empty, right? An empty cup rings like a bell, and that sound is what's lighting up the moon in Pisces. So that said, when you see the Princess of Cups, it's referring to that actual transformation, and it's not coincidence that we're finding ourselves in that place while you're feeling all this sort of like compression of all this emotional energy happen. It's there. But there's also some other symbolism here that I'm going to point to, and it's essentially that turtle coming out of the cup. And I'm just going to use this analogy that there is a little piece of you, and this is what you're hearing about when you say that you're sort of feeling a calling to come back to your roots. But you're having this sort of spiritual hole that needs to be filled, and I can certainly say that you can find it in your mother religion, right? You don't have to deviate from your beliefs to have a more robust connection and a greater conversation when you're praying, and to not figuratively but literally share proximity, space, form with creation. That's what Christ taught. Christ was ecstatic in that truth, and he knew he was God as one of those pieces of that Trinity, but not the only one. Why else would he ask the Father for things, or why else would he mention that when I'm gone, my sister is going to be here, don't worry, and he introduced the Holy Spirit, right? And so the goal here is, one more time, recognize that there is a conversation always happening. That's three things: the speaker, listener, and thing spoken. And we're always pretending when we're the speaker, and so recognize that. When you're listening, recognize that the person speaking is full of shit. Why? Because we can't not speak through an identity. So it's not about destroying the ego, it's about realizing we need it in order to speak and try to have an authenticity during that process. But that it's not our faults. We have to take on an identity in order to talk, and that's certainly not who we are. If we were being ourselves, we wouldn't need to speak, because we would all recognize already, and we would occupy the same space with no desire to communicate. It's this weird, interesting separation that we are witnessing that'll, necessitates the identity to begin with. But let's not forget that we are always in the state of creating that identity. We are not a being, we're a becoming. If you want to stick with the word being, fine, but remember that it's a verb, right? We are being something, and we're making a decision at every moment on what that thing we're being is. And so is the person we're talking to. So, and secondly, allow yourself to have that moment of truth. In fact, allow yourself to be ecstatic in it. We're always in a state of transforming, and this is pointing to the point where we go from this mutable fire into cardinal earth. This is pointing to that transformative process in between Libra and Sagittarius, which is a very dynamic period of time. And here we are. The heat is dissipating. Things are getting cooler. Things are getting harder. They're getting heavier as we move toward that phase. And so, I would encourage highly that you and your husband, if he's open to having that process, have that exercise that I talked about. And with respect to the other things that you mentioned here, which you were very brave to speak about, that's an issue that needs a little more than just a couple of minutes on a tarot reading to speak about. There's resources I can help you to find locally in your area. It's not a quick thing that a conversation can fix. I've known people that have gotten off of substances the right way. I've facilitated that process myself, but certainly I'm not going to say, hey, give me a call and we can fix this with a tarot reading. What I will say is that clearly you're wanting to find help, to no longer need that in your life, and to hopefully fulfill this thing that's forcing you to take on these roles. Like, what is it that can kind of get you out of that necessity and put you back on speaking your true will? And so if you want to do that, I'm open into, because again, I can even help you to find correct resources locally in your area there. I don't care if it's in another country. There's certain types of resources that could be more beneficial than others depending upon where you are and what you actually need, and that's a personal conversation that should not happen on a live chat. But get a hold of me via email. You can text me, or if you can't, that phone number is US, but you can email me at least, Discord, and we can get into a private conversation and discuss how to find those resources. And we can also spiritually have that conversation as well. Maybe bring your husband in on that, and we can talk about what that exercise of holding hands and remembering who fell in love with who. Right? Okay, and I'm just going to kind of end it there for now. And thank you, Cornelia, for listening. And it's I encourage, if you didn't, start the video over and kind of listen. It may be strange to hear from a Christian perspective someone talking about pentagrams and prayer, but it'll help you to at least understand the conversation. And I spoke a few things in the beginning of the stream that are very relevant to the ecstatic moment of becoming, like, actually coming into contact with creation and what that means, like actually practically how to do that, right? And so I encourage you to take a look at that. And I don't charge, so if you need any clarification, that's just let me know. I have a donation thing set up on my website, and primarily that's like for group stuff that kind of I need to travel for, or that if I'm providing some material and stuff, I'll say, hey, if you want, or whatever the case. Tarot readings and things like that, or it's we can, let's get to the heart of the question and let there be any kind of closure, and that be the goal. Not that I'm judging anyone who charges for readings. It's your time is valuable. But yeah, and it's I won't deny it's nice when people kind of throw me a little thing here and there, and it feels good, and it allows me to do certain things, whatever. But that's like, don't be afraid to engage, because you're not going to be upsold anything, right? I don't have any courses that I'm going to sell you. I don't have any whatever that it's not what I do. I don't even have my store up right now. I sell incense and tarot decks and things. I don't even have the stuff up right now. Eventually it will be up there, and it's essentially what I'm going to be doing is searching on Amazon and beating whatever the price is by 10%, just so I can, be the lowest place to get incense, be the lowest place to get a tarot deck. Like, you buy your Crowley Thoth and it's it's not going to bang you over the head for the cost. Or if you want to get a whatever deck. Okay. So, Lisa. If you're still here. Stay fly. I love that. Stay fly makes me feel like, I don't know, it seems nostalgic to me. Like I'm You know, I'm a Gen Xer, and, you know, we actually use that language. Like, there's not many people out there that actually have said the words, "That's so fly." Unironically, like they weren't being cool. They just, that's the way we talked. We said some cringe stuff. Today I came across my grandfather's book, Who Left Her Family Before Passed. Okay, cardiologist, Chiang Kai-shek. Okay. Uh-huh. Cool, okay, yeah. Sure. How interesting is that, by the way, huh? Wow, very powerful. Well, okay. Let's think about how I want to read this. You know, I have to assume, due to the fact that he was a cardiologist and was chosen for a high-profile person, meant that he was regarded in his field, right? You know, I mean, everyone wants the best doctor, but people who can afford it to get the best doctor, and apparently your grandfather was the best doctor, you know what I mean? And so, he clearly was obviously respected in his field, right? And so that's something to be proud of, because we can't deny that implies that there might be some genetic benefit, right, advantage that you have, just by virtue of the fact that someone in your family has been proven in some fashion. But that said, though, you know, let's take a look at. First of all, I'm going to answer these questions backwards, right? So why today? I'm going to answer that question first. Like, why did it happen today? This is the Nine of Cups. And so, now 9, and specifically this 9, is a very kind of magnanimous card. And what this means is it's an idea of an individual who kind of takes on the role of making everyone happy. But another energy, another vibe, another way that you could interpret that is this idea of a, if you can imagine, like, close your eyes and hear like you're inside of a tavern, and it's not a loud tavern, but there's chatter, people are talking, there's like glasses clanging, and you can kind of hear the din of the tavern, and everyone seems to be in a relatively decent place because there's somebody talking or playing piano or singing or something occurring where everyone's attention's at, and that person's kind of making the room happy. Another way that you can see it is like someone at a karaoke bar is singing, and everyone in the room kind of joins in. There's a vibe or an energy of that. Their attention is commanded by virtue of the fact that they're the most pleasant thing in the space. Now, how that would apply to why today is sort of esoterically read that way. There's this idea of the fact that there is this thing you found. You came across the book, i.e., that's the player in the bar, right? That's the singer. That's the whatever the case, the thing that drew the attention. And the reason that their attention was drawn is because of joy. So you have to ask me, like, when you say you came across it, like, was it given to you? Were you digging through stuff? And you know, like, the why today is the answer to that is going to come from the unification of you answering to yourself why, like, where did you find it? And this idea of it being singled out for joy's sake, right? In my mom's shelf. Okay, all right, okay. And so they use it as a means of creating joy. What I'm getting at is the reason you found the book was to spread joy, to make people happy with whatever's in or on there, right? And I'm going to expand on that here. Underneath this, I'm going to talk about we're removing in Capricorn. Heavy stuff here. This is Capricorn and this is Leo. But more importantly, what you have here is that there's an influence that is strong, but nefarious, meaning that not nefarious, doesn't care, selfish, right? Like some people aren't evil, they're just selfish, and so they're indifferent, and that behavior leads to things that are bad and evil, right? This is an influence that was related to your grandfather. Here we have lust. What this card refers to is overcoming the urges, speaking to power is another way that I would, under this circumstance, so this is not necessarily 100% what the card means all the time, usually subduing passions or balancing that, your animal self. What I see with respect to your grandfather here is the idea that he was in a position to speak to power the truth, to potentially not uncover, but shed light on something that was wrong and shouldn't be considered, or something that it was corrupt and should be not included in the conversation. Like there's a corruption that by him having the strength to speak to power was shed light on. And that facilitated some type of amelioration, right? Some kind of elevation of spirits. Well, this just came out in the last as well, and it's referring to the period of time that we're ending in, which is the right now we're in the 9 of Wand, moving into the 10 of Wand. Astrologically, we're getting toward Capricorn soon. All right, we're going to be in Capricorn very soon. Let me pop up the wheel here for everybody. All right, Capricorn starts on December 23rd. For the Christians in the room, Jesus was a Capricorn. Anyway, so, and funnily, 9 of Wand is the center of the galaxy. Like if you were to stare at Sagittarius, at the end of the 9 of Wand, that period of basically 20 degrees Sagittarius, you'd be looking at the center of the Milky Way. But so what this is referring to is the idea of Sagittarius, and this whole period of time right before here is the lifting, and then the bad stuff is kind of left, and those two things are now separated. So where there was corruption all over, it got separated in this process, and that's due to some ability to speak to power, like to not be afraid to point at something that was maybe not so obvious. Sometimes it could be something as simple as, hey, listen, I'm observing XYZ, and it just seems silly that we would do that. Like, why are we putting this chemical in this if it's not necessary any longer, or why are we allowing a certain type of behavior when it's clearly there's no benefit to doing that, or whatever the case. There could be many circumstances where that would take place. And now, as far as if there's any particular message, and I want to be clear that I'm not implying that this is a message from your grandfather. What I'm implying is that your grandfather was an identity, right? And that doesn't mean simply because he's gone that the thing that animated him isn't still here and present. The same thing that's animating us, that's moving the stars. And so what I'm going to be doing here when I talk about a message is something related to invocation, like invoking that egregore, and it's almost equivalent, and pardon me because it almost seems profane to say, but it's almost equivalent to like a chat GPT version of a person. And the reason I use that analogy is because I you know, a lot of people try to, and they take money from people talking about they're speaking to their loved ones. Man, the person who was the identity that chose the vocabulary to speak the words that was your grandfather wasn't even real, right? It was a function of psychology and biology and all these other things that how we choose our personality in the moment. We're making it up as we go. So how can they be speaking to a person that was like, I mean, your grandfather was a different person based on the moment he was in, who he's in the room, when he was speaking to a doctor, when he's speaking to a patient, when he's speaking to power. He was a different person. And so, you know, with a medium, like, who are they talking to? Well, who they're talking to is the thing before there was a necessity to create an identity. What does that person have to say, right? And that's what this card is. The Princess of Sword is very similar in nature to the Princess of Cup, in that they both are on that outer ring and they are pointing to a very specific type of transformation. This is here around the edge here, right? And you'll see that the Princess of Cups moves into Swords. And so at the end of Sagittarius, when we're in that cup, we then move into the sword phase. And that starts at right where we are right now, that same idea that we've been talking about with Sagittarius. But specifically, what is her story uniquely? Like, where is she coming from and to? And because here's where she ends, and she represents this period at the end of Pisces and then moving into Aries, you know, water into fire, the new year. This story is basically the temple has been toppled, and she's in the process of fighting that force. This is of somebody who is over it and has been moved to the point that they are acting. Are you Pisces as well? Awesome. Okay. So then, yeah, and Pisces is that's a biggie. That's an important part of the year. If the cup isn't fully empty, it can't ring pure. And the sound that ignites Aries is not good. And it can start the whole year off in a bad note. And so Pisces, make sure Pisces has, you know, what it needs to be safe enough to empty fully. And feel comfortable enough to allow that process so that the year starts off better, right? But this is the same idea. The message is, and again, this is not your grandfather speaking to you, but we talked about that. But nonetheless, the message is, don't be afraid to talk to power. Don't be afraid to, when you see not just an injustice, but something that needs to be stopped, that you're comfortable speaking to it. Okay? And if you like, we can obviously even do like a further thing. It's not really appropriate necessarily for a live stream, but we can do a further thing and, you know, get really into different aspects of that and so forth. And I'd love to know more if you discover more about that. Like if you wind up doing like a deeper research and find out about his role. There may be some very interesting resources that are available from different perspectives on who was responsible for what during what times to facilitate change that you're talking about. And thank you so much for popping in. I appreciate it. And yeah, you could reach me at Discord, email. I pop into Twitch occasionally. And so forth. And it's important to illustrate here, you know, not just for Lisa, not just for Cornelia, but for all of us. These cycles rhyme throughout our lives. All right? You could look at yesterday as an example, and you can point to some point during your day yesterday that kind of was a Sagittarius moment, or there was kind of a Taurus moment, right? Or there was kind of a Leo moment, or even a Capricorn, like a moment where you felt like you were rock. If you looked at your week, you could say there was a moment in my week where I had my Pisces moment, right? Or and so we can see these echoes throughout our lives, both on a daily basis, a monthly basis, the cycle of our life from birth to death, the cycle of our family from the beginning, which was as far back as we can trace, to the point that we're at right now, looping back on itself, right? And where are we on that wheel? Another way of putting that is that, you know, everything is always working through some cycle, and all these 8 symbols are really just the same thing moving through different states, right? It's not like there's different waves bouncing off of each other. It's the same thing, just changing states over time, right? And that concept of the difference between who you are and who you're becoming, and seeing that transformation in the middle as the state that we're in, can sometimes be a little confusing. It can, you know, kind of not be so obvious what our identity is or should be. And that's where we have to take a step back and remember that we're always doing that, and we don't have an identity. Our identity is what we decided is in the moment. We have a true name. If we were open enough to speak it, we'd be able to. And how do we speak it? By listening. And realizing that we're the speaker. And when we become the speaker, we know the will behind the reason to speak to begin with. We know why we chose to speak, and then so we know the meaning. We understand the why. The words don't matter anymore. Once you know why the need to speak existed, there's no need to choose words. You understand. You become the thing spoken, the idea that elicited the whole thing to begin with, the actual meaning behind the words. And we have the capacity to recognize that. And it can inform us in our decisions, in our identity of who we're pretending to be in the moment. Because who we're being determines how we hear the words and how we interpret them, what we speak, and how we want to be heard. What we value and what we don't. You know, these are all things that are a function of who we're pretending to be, right? And if we forget that we're in an act of pretending, then that can be a very confusing circumstance. Everyone else is doing the same thing, and we just take for granted what we hear. Oof, that dangerous stuff. Can't do that. Oh, I love it. That's great. That's the stage we're about to enter. This is the Ten of Wand. It's Saturn in Sagittarius. Right now we're Moon in Sagittarius, and then we're going to be moving into Saturn. This is the if the phoenix is born from the ashes, the Ten of Wand is the bonfire that it burns in, right? This is the space that allows that to take place. It's not the fire that the phoenix is born from. It's the ashes. It has to go through the immolation first, right? It can't be born from ashes until ashes exist. So this is the fire that allows that process to take place. And of course, the birth of the phoenix is the thing that's being lifted, and the stuff that's left behind is what wasn't part of it ever to begin with anyway. It's the same thing as, like, for instance, in the case of someone who's passed away. The thing that got lifted away was what they always were, and what's left behind as the husk of the body that we put in the ground, that's not who they were. That was the car they drove for a minute. And so this is the process of that separation. And the thing that got lifted, it's still there. That's the phoenix, right? And that requires ashes to take place. So, beautiful little lesson in that card. You're right, kitten. It does mean a lot. Anyone who, even just being here and listening, it means a lot. But if it means enough to hit the subscribe, then even better. And to comment on a video, even better, you know. And just kind of spread the word of people that are at least attempting to speak the truth, right? You know, that are coming from the right place. And so I'm going to just put out there a last call for alcohol. If anyone needs any advice on anything or could use any insight, let me know. Otherwise, I'm going to kind of get the stream wrapped up here in the next couple of minutes. And so I'll just kind of hang out for a minute. And if anyone's out there listening and wasn't brave enough to ask, now's the time. You're safe, I promise. And if you don't want to, you can go over to Discord, or you can private message me, and we can kind of keep it on the DL if you're, you know, shy, and that's okay. Otherwise, tonight was great. I think I said a couple of really neat things, and hopefully sparked some conversation on a couple of, you know, any magicians out there in the community that want to enjoy or to join that conversation. I'd love to have a little roundtable and us discuss Pentagram magic from a few different perspectives. I know I have a very special person that's going to be joining me on a conversation on here tomorrow night on Twitch, which is going to be a lot of fun, and we're going to be speaking about a few things related to the magical community. But eventually, you know, her background's OTO and ceremonial magic, and so it's going to be a good perspective on, like, LBRP from someone who, you know, really does it and knows it from an intimate perspective. And those types of conversations, if you'd like to join that conversation, you have something to add to the conversation, let me know, and we'll get you on. Even if I just drop you in a private Discord audio chat and then just feed you in through the thing here, you can be on live. We can talk. Otherwise, it was really a pleasure tonight. Been off for a little bit due to my kind of chest thing, and it felt good being on. And so, you know, as you kind of ponder some of this, of what it means to be the speaker and the listener and the thing spoken, and that when we become the thing spoken, we occupy the same space, you can realize that when I say the words "I love you," who's saying them, who they're intended for, and what it really means. And so just don't forget that I love you always.